The Six Nations Show on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning!
Updates, analysis and opinion across all OTB channels from start to finish.
I've never seen a team like Ireland before.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Radio. The Six Nations Show.
Yes, good afternoon to you all, and you're very welcome along to episode 5 of the Six Nations Show here on OTB Sports with me, Neil Treacy. It's the final weekend coming up, and the big one for Ireland on Super Saturday. England at the Aviva Stadium. Neither side in contention to win the tournament, unfortunately, but a win this weekend could arguably be the difference between finishing 3rd and 5th. So a lot of money on the table for both unions, and things would look a lot differently if you were finishing 3rd rather than 5th in the competition this season. Get your comments into us across our live streams. We'll try put as many as we can to our panel. That is James Downey and Johne Murphy, who are joining me in just a moment. First of all, though, we will get straight into the team news, because Ireland haven't named their team. They're naming it a little bit later on this afternoon. Just after 3 o'clock is when it's coming up. England, on the other hand, have named their starting 15, and we'll go through it now in full from the backs. At fullback again this week, Max Malins, after an impressive Six Nations debut, or for first start last week. Anthony Watson and Johnny May on the wings again as usual. Henry Slade is out injured, so that means Elliot Daly, who was dropped for Max Malins and normally plays fullback, he's actually coming into the centre, playing starting a game for England in the centre for the first time since 2016 in the Six Nations. Owen Farrell alongside him, captaining the side at inside centre. Johnny May on the other wing. George Ford then at out half alongside Ben Youngs. And in the forwards, as we can see now, Mako Vunipola, Luke Cowan-Dickey and Carl Sinclair again in the front row. It's an unchanged pack. Maro Itoje and Charlie Ewells in the second row, with Mark Wilson, Tom Curry and Billy Vunipola all in the back row. Then across the subs bench, Jamie George once again has to settle for a place on the bench, with Ellis Genge and Will Stewart alongside him as well. Johnny Hill, Ben Earl, Dan Robson is the sub scrum half. Ollie Lawrence and Joe Marchant also complete the match day 23 for England. And as I say, Ireland aren't naming their side until a little bit later on. So James Downey and Johnny Murphy, afternoon. That gives us still a bit of time to speculate what is going to be happening over the next few hours, because there are a few big calls that have to be made. Particularly, like, straight up, there's injuries to James Ryan and Gary Ringrose, so we know for a fact there are going to be changes from that game against Scotland last Sunday. I might just start though with the selection everyone's been kind of wondering over the last few days. And Johnny, I'll come to you first, because is James Lowe going to start or not? I know on week 2 of the championship, or after week 2 of the championship, I remember you were on with us and we were talking about James Lowe and the couple of mistakes he made against France. And, you know, at the time you were saying you probably didn't think it was like those mistakes were worth what he was going to offer you in attack. I imagine after the Scotland game last weekend, you probably haven't changed that opinion.
No, not really. I think there's a lot of talk at the moment kind of around systems and what kind of the difference is between Ireland's and Leinster's, but they're very, very similar. The only kind of the biggest difference would be where they place their nines. So I think the individual error count is actually the main issue that's happening in the defence. And most teams in England and Ireland play with a 13-2 defensive system. Wingers are high. You leave last man. That's the way people defend now. So I'm not sure the difference in terms of the placement of the nines, probably off a set piece would affect, but in general terms, I think it's individual errors that are costing him, particularly in his reading, and then obviously the last day, just an individual error around a tackle, and he is under the microscope, I suppose, at the moment. So every mistake he makes is going to be highlighted. So it's a difficult one, but and they have to manage the changes, obviously. With the couple of knocks they have, so but yeah, I would expect him not to be starting.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up. Obviously, I was kind of asking, do you, like, if you were the head coach, would you be dropping him? And then I was going to follow up, but you've kind of answered that by saying, do you think he's going to be in the starting team?
No, I don't think so. Now that depends on what way they look to move around their back line with the changes that need to be made. But I wouldn't envisage seeing him in the team this weekend.
And just before I bring James in as well, to go back on, as you were saying, from what you can see, the defensive systems of Leinster and Ireland are actually similar enough. So why are we seeing more of these mistakes from him in an Ireland shirt? Is it down to the increase in level, like it's just test level, it's a massive step up, or is it a case of maybe he made a couple of mistakes and all of a sudden the confidence is starting to drain a little bit and teams might be targeting him a little bit more?
I'd say it's probably a perfect combination of both. It is obviously a big step up from Heineken Cup level, and then people are probably using him. That'd be another thing that'd be in the thought process of when it comes to selection, was how is he going to be targeted? What are England going to do to try and test his reading capabilities on the edge of the line? So I think it's probably a perfect combination of both. Confidence is probably a small bit low because it's the majority of what people are talking about. He is an excellent player, and I'm sure no doubt that jersey could be his for a long time, but it's just something that he just needs to work on at the moment.
James, afternoon. What would your opinion of this situation be?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. I think you're talking about your defensive systems there, and I think you look at when they are playing 13-2, as Johne alluded to there, that you have 13 in that front line. I think we've seen it before with Jacob Stockdale as well, in terms of his individual reads and making wrong decisions. You're quite isolated out there in the wing, and he just seems to not trust his inside man, which is quite surprising given that they were, I suppose, Leinster colleagues as well. I think they should be so used to each other. I agree again with Johne in terms of, I don't think he's going to play this week. I think it's going to be a tough call, but the right call, because there's no time for, I'll give him a few more weeks and he'll be fine. This is too big a game to gamble. And England will come out going, if they play him, we're going to pepper him, we're going to target him all day, and he's on a low ebb of confidence at the moment. So it'd be certainly a place I go to. But I do think that potentially, he is so good going forward, that he is going to be a massive future part of the Irish setup. But I do think that defensively, and you've seen it with Leinster a couple of times over the past couple of years, he's made a few wrong reads. It wouldn't be a strength. I'm sure it's massively highlighted now under that microscope, and I'm sure Andy Farrell and Simon Easterby have sat him down, gone through his game and just said, look, you've got to trust your 13, you've got to not bite in and make wrong reads. And look, basically, like the one-on-one tackle, you've just got to nail them. You can't afford to, in schoolboy rugby, you can't afford to miss those, so you can't afford to miss it at international. But yeah, I expect him to be shipped out.
And if he is, how important is it from Andy Farrell's point of view, from a man management point of view, as to how he actually handles it and how he speaks to James Lowe and how he gets the message across?
Well, I think if you look at it in a club capacity and you see if he's not played well, the coach can sit him down, have that chat. It's got to be the same. It's got to be the same sort of situation there, that at international, look, we've given you a couple of games. We can't keep going back to this. Look, you're on a low ebb. Yeah, that's fine. But I think Jordan's probably carving up in training. If you're going for like a straight swap there, Jordan Larmour, I'm sure, is putting pressure on. He's going, well, will I get this chance if I made these certain amount of mistakes? People will be calling for change that way. So it's horses for courses, really. I do think that this is where Andy Farrell's man management comes into the fore, and he's got to really step up with it. And I'm sure he knows himself. There's going to be a knock on the door. You do as a player. When you have a bad game. When you have a couple of bad games, and that your head's on a chopping block. And I guess potentially he got trained out of his skin this week, and he's looked brilliant in training. They said, look, we'll stick with him. I don't really see if they will, but it's got to be managed well, and I expect Andy Farrell to manage it quite correctly. But he's a professional, so I'm sure he'd know and expect.
Johne, I'll come to you first on this, but I'd like to get your kind of, to go back to your own playing careers, and if there were periods where you had been dropped, if you have experienced kind of both sides of man management, where it either was or wasn't handled well by whoever your head coach was at the time, and the impact it has on you as a player.
Jimmy, what are you laughing at?
Because You used to get called out the whole time.
Yeah, I did. I used to get called out the whole time. Tuesday fear was something that I lived with for a long time, unfortunately. Yeah, it varies. I think, as Jimmy alluded to, I've had plenty of those calls. So yeah, I think the most important thing is around the honesty attached to it, that it's straight up. And I think the shorter, the sharper, and how the more clinical it is, the better. Saying, you need to deliver on this, you're not delivering on that. And then sometimes when it is just a toss-up, it's to be able to say, look, there's nothing in it. This is just my gut feel. This is where I'm going, and that's why you're not playing. That can be very, very hard to take, but that's the head coach's job, and they have to make those calls sometime. But I think everyone now is very much along those lines, and as Jimmy already said, yourself when you're not playing well, or you've made those few mistakes, and you just have to get the head down and keep going.
I get the impression you've thick skin, so Johne, do you?
To a point, I suppose. Look, it comes with the territory, and it shows resilience, I suppose, at the end of the day, and it builds up your character. But there was a few days where myself and Jimmy would have gone off and had our coffee, and I would have vented with him for a while, all right. But it's important that you get that outlet as well, and you're able to do that with certain people, and but then try and put your best foot forward when you get on the training park.
James, your own experiences, were there times where you've been dropped and you've come away from it thinking, do you know what, I've been given something to work here, and it hasn't fully dented your confidence, or were there other times then when the message was delivered to you and you felt really, really hard done by and it took you a while to recover?
Yeah, that's a bit of everything. I've played brutally and known that I'm gone, and like even when the team sheets or they're calling out the team sheet or whatever, and you have no notice. Look, everyone does it differently. I know from Johnny's situation and my situation at Munster, I know like they used to pull you aside just before you go in the meeting and give you just a little heads up. Yeah, you're not playing this week. And like, what? And then meeting starting, so you wouldn't have time to kind of react or give out to them too much, and then you kind of sat there and they're calling out the team, and you're not even listening to what's been said, because you're pretty angry. But if you get ahead, like for me personally, if I got a heads up early, I like to be dealt with that way. I like to kind of go not in front of everyone, or not when they name a team sheet and everyone's looking at you going, geez, your man's not named, and expected him, geez, he got dropped, because everyone's listening for their own name, and that's all you want. So, but I used to like getting a heads up, process it myself, deal with it, and they give it their reasons. I give my reasons why I thought it was rubbish, and then literally it would just go, right, bite the bullet and go, right, okay, we go again next week, and you draw a line under it. And that was just the way I did it. There's different ways managers do it, and like I say managers, but it's like being at all the clubs I was at, it's so differently handled in each place, and it was quite interesting. Like one's going to work for one and certain one for another. I liked when they had that kind of Diaworo, who was the fella who was on top of things, and he didn't really have a hands-on in coaching. He just dealt with me. And Jim Malner was the best for that, no on-field coaching after year 1 or 2, and then he would just like pull me in and have a chat, and everything was chat, and the coaches didn't necessarily have a say. Same with Di Young, he'd just pull me in and just say, look, this is what we're doing this week, and it can be difficult, but look, it's part of the game, it's part of professionalism. You're not going to play every week. There are certain lads that will be put down as on the team sheet, but that's a small majority, a tiny majority, and at international rugby even smaller again, because you've got quality players knocking over your shoulder. So look, everyone's got to get used to it, and it's part of it.
Yeah, comment here on our YouTube stream from Owen Munster. Completely agree with James Downey about Larmour. If Jordan put in the tackling performance Lowe gave, then he wouldn't be playing this weekend. Not good enough at this level to be missing tackles. He did. On the mention of Jordan Larmour there, guys, what's your take? Would it be Jordan Larmour or Jacob Stockdale coming in? Because wing is going to be a hugely important position this weekend. If you think about Elliot Daly starting in the England centre, fair chance there's going to be a lot of like low kicks put down into the channels, getting the wingers turned towards their touchline quite a lot. Like, it is going to be a big call.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah,
so. Sorry, go on, John.
It's going to be a tight one. I think Stockdale, in terms of his power, could potentially kind of get the nod there. Also, it's a left foot, which they potentially have lost if Lowe's not going to play. So it's a bit more like for like. And if they want to have that left foot option, it's against a team that kicks a lot, which they're going to end up in a lot of kick battles, you would imagine, given the stats around the kicking games from England throughout the Six Nations. So I would say probably Stockdale might edge it just because of his left foot, but it's going to be a very, very tight call.
Yeah, that's interesting as well with the left foot, and especially when you have someone like Elliot Daly come back into centre, and England kick so much. I played at Wasps with Elliot, and he was a centre then, and I guess he was only kind of pushed the fullback towards the end, and that's where they kind of saw him as a fullback. But he's always been a centre coming through all the way, and I think I thought he was so good at centre, and I thought he was wasted a little bit at fullback, but he does have that nice little outside break. I know Henry Slade is a box of tricks as well, but to have that left foot can certainly manipulate backfield. So again, a lot will depend on how the lads are trained this week and who you're going to go with. We're talking about dropping James Lowe, and Stockdale's been playing so well, and Larmer's there, so we've got some decent back three there, which is great to see. And Keenan's been so solid as well at the back, and so good going forward. But it's going to be a tough call in that one. If you are going to firstly pull out James Lowe and then put in a Jacob, but I do see the merits for Jacob to go in as a like for like against the English back three.
And Johnny, just one final point on James Lowe before we move on, because there are other calls to be made. This is a question from one of our listeners who is described as shocker, but he asks, if Ireland were performing well, would we be questioning James Lowe defensively? If this team was more attacking, would we be praising the attack and defence wouldn't be as big an issue?
Yeah, but we're not, though. So it's very hard to answer that question. That it's, they're in terms of their attack. I also think there's a lot of flack being thrown at them at the moment, in terms of that they're not looking to attack as much as we would like. They're just being inaccurate at times. You look at, and there's been all those memes this week about Tadhg Furlong's 2 steps. If he passes that ball to Johnny Sexton, there's actually a high likelihood that we could score a try from our own 22, where it goes to CJ Stander and then the ball doesn't go to hand off that pass. So they're very, very close in terms of their transition game and their attack to, you look at Robbie Henshaw, anytime he carries, he's automatically looking to get his hands free post tackle. They are looking at those things, but this is a work in process. It's only kind of probably a year, 18 months into their first part, and that's been a disruptive season for the Irish coaching staff. So it's going to take a while, but I certainly do think that their willingness and want to counter and to play off transition is there. And if you just look at that clip in isolation of Furlong, 2 steps, that goes to Johne, then there's probably a likelihood of a massive line break there, if not a score.
Johnny, do you realise there now you've just ruined the week for so many people? You've ruined that Tadhg Furlong clip by pointing that out. You're like the guy that'll be with the kids at the magician show and say that the rabbit was in the hat the whole time.
Look, it's not my fault people are cutting the clip short.
A couple of other selection calls we need to go through. Gary Ringrose replacement in the centre. Who do we think is going to be there? Aki or Chris Farrell?
That's going to be a tough call. Again, you're going to look at a situation where you're going up against someone who hasn't played centre in a while. So are you looking for physicality? Even though the two boys are extremely physical, do you want to target Elliot Daly, who again has been a little bit raw playing 13? That is going to be an interesting call. Personally, for an attacking perspective, I'd like to see Chris Farrell start, and then I'd like, if Bundy was on the bench, I don't know if we could facilitate that, but I think Chris Farrell deserves a crack, especially just his arms, just that reach. You're talking about offloads, how good Robbie's been. I think Chris as well could bring a different part, taller as well, can really impact on Farrell and Daly. I like what Chris Farrell brings. I think he's a nice subtlety to his game for such a big man. And I just think he needs a shot in one of the big games too.
And Johnny, the James Ryan replacement there's a couple of options that you could realistically go for here. The obvious one is probably Peter O'Mahony comes into the back row after his suspension and Tadhg Beirne goes to the second row. Or do you want to have an extra bit of power and put Ryan Baird straight into the second row and keep Tadhg Beirne on the back row, so you have almost 3 second rows in the pack?
I suppose it gives the line out kind of if Pete comes in, it doesn't necessarily impact too much on the line out, given that he's a jumper. I would say it's probably going to be Beirne into the second row and Pete on the edge. We're probably with Baird coming off the bench. I think he's been extremely impressive, but it's probably just. I'd love to see it and see him being thrown into the melting pot there. But I would imagine that I would say that it's going to be Beirne to the second row and Pete onto the flank potentially. But it's look, if you can also flip it on his head. If you put Beirne into the second row, you're then essentially playing. You're playing four back rowers. And then obviously, so it's going to be interesting to see in terms of calling the line out, that kind of stuff as well. But I would say that, Pete's experience, particularly at line out time, would probably see him go onto the flank.
James?
Yeah, no, agree. I think Pete to come in, again, he's bringing our line out's been so strong, that'll only reinforce it. I think the way the back row is going to be such a key battle at the weekend. Like, just to see Curry and Connors go up against each other would be something worth the entry fee alone, I'm sure. So back rowers, certainly extra back rowers in the field, someone to deal with. I told you, I think Tadhg Beirne's putting himself down we've got to manipulate to get him in somewhere, wherever it is. He's got to be starting no matter what. So yeah, I'd go with Pete coming in at 6 and Tadhg moving the second row and keep Baird for impact off the bench.
On Tadhg Beirne, I do want to play just a little clip here from an interview I did with former Ireland prop Mike Ross on Monday evening. You can catch the full interview and the podcast on our YouTube stream as well. Here he is though, talking about his experience of playing with Tadhg Beirne during his earlier Leinster years. It took him a while to really, really nail down a starting place for Ireland, having had to go and do his travels over in Wales and come back. But I'm sure you would have crossed paths with him in his early days at Leinster. What sort of a lad, what sort of a player was he like back then?
He was an absolute pest, because we'd be doing mauling sessions and somehow he, like you see today, he'd end up wrangling on the ball and guys be poking the head off him because he's trying to get him off. But he was a bit unlucky at Leinster. He just kind of consistently injured for a year, so he wasn't really able to put his hand up for the contracts. But as I can empathise with, I had to, put the rucksack on the back and head abroad to get some game time. And he did that, and he took his opportunity and did really well with Scarlets, and then came back and Munster took him. So he's a great player. He's as you can see, he's an absolute pest on the ground. He's a pest in the maul, and he puts himself about and makes his tackles, and he's pretty handy ball in hand.
So, like when he was there at Leinster as a younger player, would you have recognised all those kind of raw materials that you're seeing in the finished player at the moment? And was it a case that he just needed to go to Scarlets and get past the injury problems and play consistent rugby for a couple of years to fully kind of morph all those together?
Yeah, big time. I mean, he was still quite young at Leinster, so he's put on a bit of weight as well. He was always a good rugby player, and like I said, he always had it. Kind of the instincts, and when you're training with Leinster and you would have the starters, which is the subs, or the guys who are playing with the A team. Training sessions did quite spicy at times, and he would always be in the thick of it.
Yeah, and Mike Ross was speaking as to promote the fact that the ISPCC Child Line, with thanks to Vodafone and Irish Rugby, are giving you the chance to win a matchday jersey from this Saturday's game against England. Each player from Saturday's 23-man Irish squad will sign and donate their own jersey. And if you want to support this and be with a chance of winning and enter this competition, donate at least €10 to idonate.ie/team of us. That is, donate at least €10 to idonate.ie/team of us and be in with a chance of winning one of the Irish team's jerseys, signed by them as well, from the matchday squad against England this weekend. Guys, on Tadhg Beirne, before the tournament, a lot of the discussion was, where does Tadhg Beirne fit in? Is he an impact player? Is he a second row or a flanker? At the moment now, is it a case of it doesn't matter where he fits in, he's in there somewhere and you make it work?
Yeah, for me anyway, he certainly is. He's earned that right. He's worked so hard. I love his attitude and how he goes about things. He seems so laid back. It's great to hear that from Mike Ross about how he's a pest, because look, we need it this weekend. But he's just seems so, like when he's interviewed after games, he's very relaxed, laid back, smile on his face. Happy enough. Thought came across extremely well, that he was up in the stands at the end of the game, and thinking the lads would finish it off and Johne kicked it. But I love that kind of relaxed aura he has about him. But then when he crosses that whitewash, he just puts his head down and gets on with it and is a pest and annoys people. And it's an Itoje-esque type, that he's such a pest, and you're going to have to go out with a game plan to deal with him. But he's also that line-out option and can turn over, as we've seen. So he's kind of he's pretty good all round, and we're trying to fit him in. Yeah, and I agree that look, it's got to be what works for the team. Is it in the second row? Is it going to be in the back row? If you're talking, if Pete was back and if James Ryan was all right, what would you do in second row wise? I'd probably keep him at I'd keep him at 6, and that'd be it. I'd get him in the team, and no matter where it is, you need someone like him involved. And
Johne?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think he's someone that has deserved his jersey wherever it is. He's played he played number 8 for a period with Scarlets as well. He's played all across the back row. So I think it's something that his versatility is only an asset to him, and is certainly, he'll do a job for Ireland, for Munster, and I think he'll do a job for the Lions, particularly when during the summer. Given that versatility, it just frees up options across the board. But yeah, I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet on form at the moment.
And we'll find out that team just after 3:00. On the game against England, though, we'll probably turn to where it's going to be won and lost at the moment, because we've probably seen ever since the start of the 2019 Six Nations what blueprint England pretty much have against Ireland, and it has worked on almost every occasion. They're happy for Ireland to hold on to the ball because they know they're just going to deal with it and they're going to be able to deal with the carries. Are we going to see something roughly similar to what we saw in the Autumn Nations Cup, or have Ireland changed enough that they can kind of change things?
I think that it's going to be a case that it's probably going to be a lot of kicking in this, and it's people aren't going to probably want to hear that. But England are getting a bit more clinical. Their performances have improved probably week on week. But I think with the inclusion of Elliot Daly, they're probably going to look to manipulate our back three. And even if Stockdale does come in, as we've spoken about already, for Lowe, he has had a bit of trouble in that backfield cover and in that pendulum with the two people involved. So, I think Ireland have to be happy to play off transition ball and look to move the point of contact when they do. So play that extra pass and try and stretch England when they don't have that really aggressive defensive line set. So if they do get turnover ball, they have to click into gear straight away, because that's probably the softest line, defensive line they're going to experience throughout the game. So, I would expect a lot of kicking. Going to come down to aerial. For me, I think the two areas that are going to be pivotal are being able to win the aerial battle and then attack off that, use it like a set piece to an extent, and then also use turnover ball like a set piece. So if Byrne is in over the ball, Omani, if he plays, Connors, if they win that breakdown, particularly the defensive breakdown, and get players over the ball and get those turnovers, it's to be able to use that ball then to expose the fact that England doesn't have that really aggressive line speed coming at them repeatedly in multi-phase.
Johnny, on the use of turnovers, or the use of the counter-attack off turnover ball, like we saw it against Scotland, the amount of lineouts they stole, not to mention all the turnovers they made on the ground as well. But as Niamh Briggs was pointing out on Monday Night Rugby with us, Ireland's use of the ball once they made that turnover, they were generally just using it as a means to get the ball back and kick up the field. And look, Keith Earls and James Lowe and Robbie Henshaw actually did a really good job at times getting up there, because there wasn't as many defensive men there to kind of act as blockers, so they're able to get up and contest it for a couple of penalties on a couple of occasions. But do they need to be a little bit wiser and a little bit more adventurous with what they do with that turnover ball?
Yeah, I think it's just being a bit more clinical in that area, and when they do decide to run the ball, that the ball goes to hand and it goes to the right. We've already spoke about the furlong clip, but to make sure that they're clinical in that, because against England, when you launch off set piece against them, you're given there an opportunity for them to get into the defensive system, which is a bit more aggressive than Ireland. So if you go to width, that's exactly where England will want you, because it allows them get width to their line and come aggressively off the line repeatedly as you carry against them. Where if you can attack where their defensive line is a bit more unstructured, off line out, turnovers, but then it's just picking the right time to really to execute. So I just think it's their decision making around when to kick, when to hold on to the ball, and then just be really accurate around that. They can get a lot of change out of turnovers and kicking and getting penalties from that with their kick chase as they showed against Scotland. But now they probably need to just step forward and be that bit more clinical when they do get that turnover, that when they pass, it goes to hand, and they're really, really clinical in that area.
James, is there a fear though that this game on Saturday is going to pretty much follow the same lines of what we saw last year in the Autumn Nations Cup, what we saw last year at Twickenham as well, and going back even into 2019 at the Aviva Stadium?
Yeah, there's always that. I think, like Johnny's spoken about, kind of the attack and where Ireland can go there. It's like we've also got just on that side of it. You're only going to get a couple of chances against the English, and like you're going to have to take them. We've got to be, like the word he uses, clinical, and he's 100% right. We've got to be clinical. One or two chances, we got to nail them. But worryingly is the way Scotland played when they were chasing the game. They went quickly, took quick taps, got to space, played with speed and power, and we struggled. And I have a fear then that this England team, as you mentioned at the start, they have this blueprint of how they play against us. And when they carry hard, and they have like Big Billy be running onto it from depth, coming on, taking two or three lads on. Our defence moves back, drops back a couple of yards. The foul doesn't get around. Next thing, they can move it wide and have a go, and they can really stretch us. We've got to frustrate them this weekend and slow down their ball, and that's why, again, Ty Burns be a massive figure this weekend to get in there, and Will Connors and all the back row. Slow that ball down. Let our defence get organised, because we need to get organised, especially the power and pace that England play with. They're so big, so physical. It's great that we can match it at the start, and emotions are going to be high, and people are talking about CJ's last game, and everyone's going to be high as a kite for it, which is grand. And emotional excitement, intelligence, whatever you want to call it, will only get you so far. But you just need to be smart in how we do it. But I do have that fear is right in the back of the mind that, if we get certain things right, still though, if this England team turns up, we could be in trouble.
Yeah, and Johnny, I think if the England side that turned up against France last week rock up to the Aviva Stadium, that's going to make it very, very interesting. What did you see in England last week against France that they changed up over the previous couple of weeks? Because it was a marked difference from the game, pretty much all their games so far, actually.
Well, they played probably a bit more. There was passages where previously in the first two games they would have been happy when France kicked the ball out just to leave it and get the line out and reset. where there was a couple of ones where they threw quick line-outs, they kept the ball in play, and there was really long passages where both sides were really kind of blowing. But I just think their accuracy levels have got higher and higher as they've gone on. And I suppose with all the talk, you listen to a lot of the English analysts over the previous week, a lot of them are saying this is kind of the game of Eddie Jones's tenure in terms of where he wants to go, how he wants to do it. He was getting a lot of flack. Their backs were very much against the wall, and they came out and they gave a performance that showed that. But for me, I think it was their quickness to the ball, their ruck speed. It's been improving every single week, and that would lead itself in the build-up probably to have their best performance against us on Saturday. But look, I think someone like Will Connors is probably going to be as important as Tadhg Byrne. With his chop tackle focus, he's going to create opportunities for all our back rowers who are good poachers to get in and slow that ball down. Whether they get turnovers or not is not necessarily the key thing. It's the fact that they can slow that ball down. And if England want to play like they did against France, which was keep the ball in play, throw quick line-outs, that's going to be really, really important just to slow that speed down so we can get our defensive line set and come forward against their big ball carriers.
Guys, before we move on quickly to Wales and France, obviously I do want to ask about CJ Standard, I'd say shock announcement of his retirement a couple of days ago. I do want to come back with you. I'll get your overall thoughts on him in a second, but you would have been involved with Munster in CJ's early days, and as I was saying yesterday, I think a lot of people kind of forgot how it did take him quite a while to settle in with Munster. He had to go through, like, he was struggling to get into the team for quite a while after he arrived. Like, it wasn't as plain sailing to move straight into an Irish shirt as a lot of people are making it.
No,
it certainly wasn't.
Go on, John.
No, it wasn't. I think there was probably a difference of probably rugby cultures at the start in terms of Rob's philosophy, and then compared to what CJ was used to, and the 2-4-2 that we were playing, and that took an adjustment period across, and it took him a while to settle into that. And then as he grew into it, he just, he's excelled. CJ is one of the really, really good lads. I think he's probably been one of the best, if not the best, project player, and he's possibly up there with one of the best foreign signings that we've had in terms of what he's delivered for Munster and for Ireland. But yeah, it certainly wasn't an easy road. Like, he showed an incredible amount of resilience from how he was dealt with in South Africa, being told that he was too small, didn't suit their playing type, came to Munster. Then there was kind of, as I said, that clash of rugby cultures between South African and Rob's very much Kiwi style in the 2-4-2, and he's come through it all, and he's had an incredible career.
James?
Yeah, completely agree. Everything Johnny said there. It's at the start. I think we joined the same year, and you could see the frustration. Is how I describe his kind of first year, and trying to get to deal. Look, he had to deal with a lot of things. He'd moved countries, different culture. As he said himself, he was trying to pick up English a little bit, and then pick up Limerick English as well. So he was struggling. But it was just, look. But you could see it off the field. He wasn't starting, and everyone's like, why isn't he starting? Or he was coming off the bench, and we spoke about it at the start, and how you have to deal with it. And you could see how frustrated he was at the start, but he kept the head down, kept working. And one of the things about Munster is that you work hard, and people kind of see it, and it came to the fore. And look, he bided his time, and his quality shone, and that's what he is. He's a quality player and quality person, and great off the field. Always got a smiley head in him, and he's always great to chat to. So, look, bit of a shock to everyone. I saw it, and I was checking the days to see. I thought it was April 1st. I thought it was April Fool's Day when I first saw it, to be honest. I was like, oh, this is a joke. And I said, no, sure, we're way too early. And then I guess I kind of sat back. That was my initial reaction, sat back and thought about it. And look, I guess I understand his reasoning as well. He's he was back home, I suppose, for the first lockdown, the start of lockdown, and he was back for a couple of months. I think Munster let him go back, and I guess he's seen a lot of things back there when he was there, and the whole family, and he's his own young family, and family is massively important to him. And look, best of luck to him. Look, it's a pity for Ireland, it's a pity for Munster, and I agree with Johne. He's probably been the best project players come over.
Yeah, and a pity he won't be able to get a send-off from a full Aviva Stadium this weekend. I do want to touch quickly on France against Wales. The teams for that game have been named for the potential title decider. France named an unchanged starting team despite last week's defeat against England. They do have 3 changes on the bench though. Uini Antonio, second row Svan Rebaj and centre Arthur Vincent return in place of Dorian Aldegheri, Cyril Cassou and Cameron Woki. Meanwhile, for Wales, Wayne Pivac has called Adam Beard back into his team. He was rested last week in the 48-7 win against Italy after really good performances against Ireland, Scotland and England. So that means Corey Hill drops down to the replacements bench. Guys, this has the potential to be an incredible anticlimax, because there's a situation where a losing bonus point for Wales should France not score 4 tries. So let's just presume France haven't scored both 4 tries and got a bonus point. I want to put a situation to ye, and as players, what ye would be thinking in this situation. So if France are leading by 5 or 6 points and they are on the attack because they know that a bonus point for Wales guarantees them a title, even though it's not a Grand Slam, Wales are kind of in around their own 22, France are attacking, and Wales win turnover. Are they kicking the ball out of play to seal a championship and no Grand Slam, or are they going for the Grand Slam?
Grand Slam, 100%, straight away. Like, it's great to win a championship, but yeah, Grand Slam, like they're so hard to come by nowadays. They're so difficult, and especially I think especially with this Welsh side as well, I think they've been extremely lucky. They've rode their luck on times, and it's okay, it's great to have a championship, but Grand Slam, you'll be remembered for a Grand Slam. And you're talking about someone like Alan Wynne who'd love to kind of finish up. He's coming towards the end. Will that be around for him again? Probably not, if we're being realistic. So personally, I'd be jumping straight down the Grand Slam route.
Even though, you know, you turn over that ball again, France kick a drop goal or score a try, all of a sudden the title is out of your hands. France could win it the following week against Scotland.
They could, that's the risk. I'd be willing to take that risk, you know. Yeah. Them's the breaks, them's the calls. Probably why I was never a captain on the field much, but yeah.
Johnny, what are you going for if you're a captain on that pitch?
Yeah, I think Grand Slam. I think given everything attached to the fact that people were saying that they were really lucky, it very much wasn't expected. It's potentially Alan Wynne-Jones. You know, how long is he going to go on for? Is he going to get this opportunity again, as Jimmy's already said? Yeah, I think, and it's in their instinct as well, off a turnover ball or something like that. They want to play. They have that in them. It's in their genetic makeup. It's the Welsh rugby style. I'd be all for it. Like, this is, for some guys, you know, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to win a Grand Slam. Take it.
For Alan Wynne-Jones as well, you mentioned him. He's going for his 4th Grand Slam. Ireland have 3 ever. Alan Wynne-Jones is going for his 4th. Not to mention, I think there was probably another Six Nations title in there where he didn't have a Grand Slam. Like, that is just a staggering career.
Oh, he's been superb. I think he's supposedly 148 this weekend, maybe. And then I think 156 with Lions. Like, just incredible. Second with Richie McCaw. Yeah, he's been an incredible servant to Wales. And World Cup around the corner. You know, he's still got a bit more in the tank, hopefully. But yeah, this is his last chance. But what a super career.
Right, guys, final verdicts on the two important games this weekend. Ireland against England, first up at 4:45. Johnny, what way are you going for that?
Given it's Paddy's week, I'm going to go for Ireland by 3.
Not a convincing one, I'll be honest. James, what about you?
I just think that England are going to have too much. I think, as we've talked about, they've got the blueprint to beat us. I'd like to see a better performance, but I think England will win by 5 anyway.
And then at 8 o'clock, potential championship decider, France against Wales. What way are we thinking?
I'll go France.
I think...
Johnny, you jump in.
I'll go for... I'm going to go for Wales for Grand Slam.
And James?
Yeah, I'm going to go France on that one. So we're completely on other sides here. Yeah, no, just France.
And do France deny Wales that losing bonus point to keep it alive for the following week against Scotland?
No.
So Wales are going to have a bit of an anticlimax celebration.
Yeah.
What a way to end it, guys. Thanks a million for joining us this afternoon, James and Johne, for all your contributions throughout the few weeks on the Six Nations show as well. I hope you enjoyed the weekend. Just before we go, I'm going to run through a few more comments coming in from the listeners here. Absolutely loads of them. A lot of them on the winger situation, whether or not James Lowe will be dropped. SQ says we seem very short on top wingers at the moment. Where are the line breaks, winning one-on-ones and tries from our wingers? And he follows up, if we go with the same old of Peter O'Mahony and Murray, we'll get the same old result against England. Put Baird in and keep Jamieson Gibson Park. On Jamieson Gibson Park, I have to say I've found the coverage and the analysis of him so much different in Ireland compared to outside of Ireland. On the various podcasts I'm listening to, people are absolutely raving about him outside of Ireland, and he just doesn't seem to be getting that credit here. Colin McCunningham says exactly, look at Watson and May, Teddy Thoma, even Monty Ioane are so explosive and dangerous, consistently causing threats to defenders, an area we don't have a lot of weight behind, to be honest. It does seem to be the style Ireland are playing, though. I think they do have the quality of wingers in attack, but they just don't seem to be getting them into the game. Kevin Donoghue, Stockdale has the same problem as Lowe, not very good in defence. Paul Cowell says, if Healy wins his battle over Mako, is he a starter for the Lions? I think Rory Sutherland at Scotland will have a lot to say about that as well. He seems to be a lot of people's front runner for a test starter with the Lions. And Owen H, if we bring O'Mahony in and move Byrne away from his best position, it's going to be a long day at the office. Furlong, Henderson and Stander would be the only real carriers in that pack. There's a massive decision to be made there as to who is taking James Ryan's second row place, because as the lads were describing, there's a massive trade-off to be made there. If you're bringing in Peter O'Mahony, yes, you're getting the experience, but are you getting maybe the explosiveness that Ryan Baird might bring, having an extra second row as such in the starting 15? But before we wrap up, we will just run through the Six Nations fixtures this weekend, heading into the final round of games. Up first on Saturday, 2:15 kickoff at Murrayfield. It is Scotland against Italy, followed by 4:45 Ireland against England at the Aviva Stadium, and then Stade de France at 8 o'clock. It is France against Wales, potential Six Nations title decider. And as we look through the table, we know that obviously a win for Wales means that they will be Grand Slam champions. They will be Grand Slam champions, guaranteed of the title. France, if they win with a bonus point, they are still back in it. If they win, though, and Wales get a losing bonus point, then Wales will win the Six Nations with a game to spare for France. And Ireland, it's anything between second and fifth place on the cards for them. So a win against England this weekend, massively important. Best case scenario, though, if they are to lose, you're probably looking at fourth. But realistically, you might even be looking at fifth if they lose this weekend. But that is all we have time for on the Six Nations show this afternoon. Many thanks for listening over the course of these last few weeks. If you missed anything, as usual, you can check out our videos on our YouTube stream, or we'll have this podcasted a little bit later on the OTB Sports app. And a reminder, all of our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. Keep an eye out as well for more rugby on Off the Ball this week. Alan Quinlan will be on OTB AM tomorrow, and Brian O'Driscoll will be on with the lads this evening on the PM show. And a big thanks to Dahi Boland as well, who's been producing this show, and Emma Carroll, who's been vision mixing for us over the course of this show. We'll speak to you soon. Enjoy the games this weekend. Good luck.
The Six Nations Show on OTB Sports Radio.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone